Scary, isn't it?
Oh, they were so good.
Not delicious.
Scary.
Not ready for it.
Everybody's got their spot.
Your feet were heavy, so it's the second day. Don't like one. It's a bit. I'm seeing a picture taken 10 years ago on the Pole Express, and we did this before.
Wow, that's great.
Well, everything I was going to say about my setup.
Wow. I said, he likes time, stay home and relax. That's
Whatever it was, that's good.
Scott was.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I'll do the Cliff Notes version of comments. Basically, we convened our meeting at 5 o'clock to hear a request from one of our parents. So those meetings are held in executive session. And we came out of executive session at roughly 6:25. And now we are reconvening our board meeting. And the first order of business is a response to the executive session, and then we'll go into the agenda components of the meeting. So can we have a motion for our decision?
In accordance to the decision reached in our executive session, I move that we approve the request by Dr. Tucker on behalf of her son, Mustafa Tucker, to pay for tuition at the Compass School until Tucker either graduates or the family moves from this district.
Second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the board? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. So now we'll get into our other piece of business, which is the board meeting today. So changes, additions, and approval of the agenda.
A couple of changes. If the board would oblige us in adding a first read of a policy, the non-discriminatory mascot. And we also, Peter Merrill was gracious enough to do HAVA's reports. So ESSER 3 and GP7, we could add those to the monitoring reports under the consent agenda. That would be wonderful. And then if I could recommend a new order for the governance process. That's all right.
Yes.
To do the charter first because we have some guests. And then do facilities because we have Jonathan here.
Yeah.
Then it would be wonderful if we could do the first draft of the new ends policy update. We're hoping to get Julie out of here for a hockey game if possible. First hockey game for her son. Or is ESSER, and then the budget and the policy adoption, the monitoring report, EL10, and town meeting. Unless somebody thinks we should move EL10 up. I don't see anyone that's
Right.
here to speak to that other than Lloyd. Done, okay?
Yep.
Move that we accept the agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. So at this point, we will hear the superintendent's report, and then we'll go from there.
Since we're a little behind, I'm gonna be fairly brief. This past week, Roy and I had the honor of being guest presenters to the entire 6th grade on this social courage unit. We talked about leadership. I think we made a pretty good team. I told stories. He did the exercise with the kids, which was great. But it's a
Because I got to start late on the meeting minutes, what item?
we are on 3 communication and support to the board. Yeah, no problem. So that was a lot of fun. They're doing entire unit on social courage, and they have a lot of activities planned, and they have 3 different guest speakers that will be presenting. Roy and I went first. Also, I wanted the board to know that we were recognized this past week by the Vermont Superintendents Association. They do run a new superintendent's academy, and I was asked to be on a panel to discuss equity work. That was a lot of fun, and several administrators are participating in a 2-year-long cohort on MTSS, which is a multi-tiered system of supports. And we're working with Katie Novak, who you might remember presented to the school boards and the superintendents a few years ago. So we're working with her on ways to improve our instructional practices. And right now we're studying the collaborative time that teachers have together, and really focusing on the meetings they have and how well they're spent, and if that can be a conduit for talking about instructional practices. So very interesting work, big time commitment. And that's it.
Cool. So that brings us to number 4, governance process. Section 4, policy GP2. And we will be starting with our charter review update discussion.
So
We're gonna promote Lisa O'Neill in a second.
Right.
I don't know if you are comfortable, or Nancy, talking a little bit to the issues. Lynn, are you okay?
Yeah.
Talking.
We'll have promoting Lisa O'Neill, and then you need a copy of the agenda. Yeah, it's not on the website. Yep. Okay. There's a link for it, but if you click on it, it says.
You good? Lynn, you want to talk from the podium? Go over the changes, or? No.
Lynn Bohai, co-chair of the Charter Commission.
Were you looking for FX Glenn to join you as well? I see his hand up, that's all I'm asking. I apologize.
That's why I turned the phone on, because he asked me to call him when we started the discussion. He told you that he was going to be at Vin's with his telescopes.
He did.
And
So
so
must have gotten done early.
So it sounds like if we could promote Lisa O'Neill and FX.
Or it's
Glenn,
cloudy.
please.
It's wrong.
Sorry to interrupt.
it's okay.
I saw the hand go up and I thought he might be part of it.
Yes. He is my co-chair. Okay, I think that there are the two issues that you guys might be most interested in would be the changes to the town and school district committee and also Russ's problems with petitioning. I should tell you, we were at the school board, I'm sorry, this is a school board, select board last week on the 8th, and they decided not to decide. The process was apparently not understood well. We thought as a group that we write the language, we bring it to the two boards, which we did couple months ago. We go back and we think about what the two boards had said, then we send it off to the lawyer, then we come back to the two boards, and you guys have to find the same language to put on the warrant, at least for info night. And somehow the select board got a different version of what the events are. And that might be why they didn't make any decisions. They based their meeting was basically to hear about just cause eviction, which is, we asked them to, we gave them the power to, if they want to, create an ordinance about rental evictions. It's not a mandate. It's just giving them the power to do that if they choose to do that. Okay. So I'm not terribly good at the changes in the town and school district committee. I know that Ryan and Adam had contacted FX and me and said they have some problems with the original wording. So I know that they worked with FX about changing that. I think their main, we'll ask FX if he comes in. I think their main concern was that it was a little too prescriptive, a little too many shalls instead of voting. And so because the composition is so different for the committee now than it used to be, they want to make their own, and that made sense to us. And the petition language is still there. It's up to you guys because, well, I as a taxpayer have to pay for it, but but so do all of you. Anyway, did you have anything else you wanted me to talk? I mean, I can go through and I have marked out what the changes are from current to proposed. I can tell you where they are if you want to spend the whole night here.
Well, I think, Lynn, we've done our reading,
Good.
So
Thank you.
it's a question of questions.
Okay.
So
Actually, I do have a comment on that. The versions that were made available did not include a red line. They were just the final version of the document. I'm wanting to changes are a red line helps. Given that, and given the lack of otherwise free time in my life, I didn't go through and try to hunt down the changes.
Yeah.
So,
you're absolutely right. The select board had the same question, and FX sent them the red line version.
okay, well,
We'll have it.
okay.
If FX's ears are on,
FX is available to be promoted. FX Flynn. Awesome. He's there now.
Okay, so we can ask FX Flynn to send you all, to email you all the red line version.
Thank you very much.
He may have put it in the Google Drive that's available to everybody in town after that we saw the select board, but I haven't checked that one that closely.
I can see that.
And he's also, he left me a message on the phone today that said he's also very happy to send you the sort of calendar. What has to happen before when. Most of you probably know it by now, but that we take whatever we have at the moment to the info night in early January. And changes can still be made at that time, and changes are probably expected to be made at that time. And then the two boards get back together and after listening to the public. And
The email that FX sent out on the adoption process, or at least his interpretation of it, was very helpful. And I did read that.
Yes, and I know that Lisa had talked to me about the process, and FX was talking in the other ear about the process, and so I put the two of them together and told them to talk to each other. So they seemed to have agreed.
So the concern on the legislative side, is timing. Because of getting it through town meeting without having to have a special ballot.
Yes. Right.
So that's the thing, we can go through the process. And as long as we don't conflate the timeline, so it's interrupted, the legislature will take up charter changes past town meeting day.
Right.
And that's one of the only things that we do, as you recall. And the other concern when we get to the details of the changes is the question around that just cause, the eviction language. But it sounds like the select board decided to act on it as in the form of an ordinance versus using the charter.
No, what we did was the charter said they can or cannot, as they wish, to give them permission to adopt the charter if they choose. I'm sorry, an ordinance if they choose.
I was just thinking about getting that through all of the gates, because the just cause eviction didn't make it through the legislature last.
So the person that they heard from at the select board meeting last week was Tom Proctor, who works for Rights and Democracy and their own assistance.
Mhm.
And he probably spent at least an hour walking them through what the language in what the proposed language in the charter means and why it's there. One of the questions was, well, we don't want our charter to lose because of just cause eviction. To be voted down by the legislature. And he seems to think that there were enough candidates who, because there was so much turnover, that it may well come up.
And that, that has that potential.
And there is still the option of the two boards to take things like just cause and petition out of the charter and put them on a special item on the warrant and ask the public, do you want these things added to the charter? Instead of the two boards letting themselves.
Okay, I still don't like, as Lynn said, the paragraph about petitions and the legal opinion. I would not be opposed to pulling it out and having it a separate item. But I mean, I would go with the pleasure of the board. I mean, I've made my position on this clear from the get-go. So, and I has not changed. As I get older, I get more stubborn.
And I had some concerns, as you may remember, with regards to the treasurer for the town and the school board, and how the adoption of what should be hopefully through consensus, the same person for both roles would take place.
And I would second those concerns as well.
And I think that was basically the consensus of the board at the end of our discussions.
I mean, because honestly, the way I look at it in this forum is only provisions that apply to the school board versus
Yes,
I may have philosophical.
I've got all sorts of philosophical reactions to various things, but yes, the only one I was going to talk about were ones that directly affected the school board.
Yes, because we're in an official capacity now.
Exactly.
Yeah, it does still say the Hartford Town Treasurer shall be the Hartford School District Treasurer.
No,
Yeah, and we had a problem with that language. We would hope that would be the outcome of mutual agreement, because it makes things infinitely better for us if that is true. We just don't want it imposed upon us.
and I feel more strongly about that provision than my pet peeve.
And that was the consensus of the board. So I guess it's pretty clear where we stand as a board.
Coach FX has his hand up. I don't know if you want to.
Yes,
acknowledge
please.
him.
Yes.
FX, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so I would like to begin by saying that we took very seriously, and can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Okay. We took very seriously the concerns that were raised by the school board. Particularly Mr. North's concern about about paying for the attorney to help with petition language, and we added a section in there. I hope you had a chance to see it. That says that the boards can adopt policies to prevent abuse of the privilege, so long as the intent of the provision is honored. So I believe that that gives you wide latitude when and if this actually comes up to work your way through that. And in terms of the treasurer, I did a deep dive on state law, and the way the charter is right now, it says exactly what's in state law, which is that the town treasurer will also be the school district treasurer. What is not in the charter but is in state law is that the school district board has the authority to name its own treasurer, regardless. So you guys are in complete control already under state law, as I read it. I think that both of those concerns have been addressed. And I would say that more globally, the point that I tried to make in the email I sent last week with an easier to read version of the charter, along with a suggestion for how to proceed, would be to go ahead and make a motion to put forth the proposed charter with the no cause eviction piece carved out as a separate item, and the local option sales tax carved out as a separate item, And then if the select board does that next week, when they meet, then we'll be all set to have the official first public hearing at Info Night on January 9th. And then when it comes time to finalize the language at the end of January, you'll have had all the time between now and the end of January to actually decide and talk to the select board and come up with identical versions to put on the ballot. So what I'm hoping is that that we can proceed that way, because if we don't, then I think then what would happen would be the charter would be finalized for the warrant toward the end of January, and we would have to have the first public hearing by February 5th, which means that we might not even have 10 days to call it to make that first deadline. And if we weren't able to do that, then we'd be in that situation where we wouldn't be able to have it for the town meeting vote. So that's kind of the bind that we're in. And then also I wanted to take up what Peter Merrill asked about the red line version. The red line version, I did another red line version for this, and it is in the Google Drive, and I figured sending it to the select board, they would send it along to you, but I should have just copied all you guys, and I apologize for not doing that. But in any event, there are good red lines that have been available, and in fact, the red line from back in September is really not significantly different from the final red line. So if you had an opportunity to look at that, that should have been the opportunity to really see the ins and outs of the changes. So I guess that's pretty much my my mind dump right now, and I'd be happy to answer questions or go into more detail on what I just said.
I guess I'm unclear as to why the sentence or paragraph on the treasurer is even needed if state law covers the situation already. Isn't it a duplication?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question, but and I'll say this: a lot of times you want the charter to be easy for people to read and understand, and so it seemed like, since there was some question about that, restating state law seemed to be a way of making it clear what the situation is. And if you wanted, we could also put in the piece of state law about the school board being able to do its own thing. And maybe that would be a good idea, and we could plug that in over the course, between info night and the final language in the warrant. I don't see any problem with that.
So-
And I would like to remind everybody that the charter supersedes state law. So if you really want to be able to select your own treasurer, I would do what FX does then, and put the whole of state law in there.
Or drop the treasurer, like Russ said, and follow state law. That's the other alternative, because then it doesn't turn into a push me pull you type of thing.
With full respect intended to those who spent their time, and I'm sure it was long hours, working on this document, despite the fact that there is a popular saying about close enough for government work, and this is government work, it's not close enough for me. I do not intend to support bringing forth language that we'll present to the public with the intent in the interim to then clean up things. There's too many slips between the fork and the mouth, as it were. And too many people can get dropped between your stomach and the table. So no.
I completely agree with Mr. Merrill's sentiment. I mean, I think actually it does the opposite and makes it more confusing in some ways, because people could read the statute, think that's what applies, and not read the charter and vice versa. So again, I don't see the point of this. I don't think it accomplishes anything. And I would like to amplify my gratitude for the people working on what appears to be a thankless committee, the charter committee.
It's especially at the finish line.
Exactly. And I do appreciate the modifications to the petition section. It does not address my concern about the implicit, it could be interpreted as implicit approval of each of the boards of whatever the petition is. Because somebody could say, well, the school district's attorney read it, and that could be implied approval. So I think that's my concern. I mean, I fully support the right of the public to generate petitions, but it behooves in that responsibility is the responsibility to get the wording right.
So it would be nice to be in the position of presenting a document. I do not think it's necessary to present a document. We have another year. We can do these again. I would prefer that we go forward with something that is has clarity. Yes, there may be some option for us to deal with the petitions as we wish to deal with them, but the way it is now is sort of the perfect dream for lawyers who are looking for a cause and a paycheck, because it's inevitably going to result in somebody being unhappy and saying that you didn't do it right. So I would support Russ's concerns as well.
FX has a split hand over here, would you like me to have?
Yes, please.
Can you move
FX.
FX back to the,
He's a panelist, he should be able to.
and it looks like you moved back to attendee.
Jump, okay.
Okay, FX, just unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry about that. That was my fault. I accidentally got disconnected from the meeting. Okay, so I'd like to point out that this language works in Brattleboro. They haven't had an issue with it, around the petitions, and I understand the concern that, and I understand, Russell's point about going out and, making sure you get the language right and so on and so forth. But a lot of times you have well-meaning people in the community who want to do something, and they don't really know how to approach it and think about it. They know they want to get something done, and it just seems unfair to have them in a situation where they don't really have any resources to figure out how to get it right. And one of the things that this committee was charged with was to find ways of restoring more of a sense of and more of a feeling of the town meeting form of government, which has frankly been lost since we began having the charter, where there isn't the opportunity to amend motions on the floor at town meeting and and to vote on them there and to actually do anything meaningful in calling a special meeting. And the gap in the charter is that there's no discussion of what the what the rights and the abilities of the people of the town as town meeting are able to do. So, we might, I've said this before, perhaps Hartford should move to become a city and have, a city council and make the elected representatives, really have, full authority. And just, you vote for people to be on the council and then that's it. After that, it's out of your hands. But that's not the, town meeting form of government is quite different. And in its original form, you had to be in the room when the decision was made. And because you were in the room, you also had the full right to modify motions, bring up new things, etc. And so I feel that that this whole section, including the part about making resources available to people, to well-meaning people who have a serious thing that they want to bring up, was right in line with the charge that you gave us as a committee. So that's I guess my best argument for going forward with that. And yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to say, well, let's just wait another year and take the time to get it right, I'm not sure what the process is going to be to get there, because at some point in time, there's going to have to be, a sit down among the 12 people who are going to have to decide what's on the ballot and decide what's going to be on the ballot. And, when is that going to happen? And I think that, moving ahead with what we have now at least sets the stage and focuses the mind that has to happen sometime in the next 7 weeks. So that's my best argument on that.
Go ahead, Russ.
And I understand, and I think you and I are always going to disagree, FX. I respect your opinion, but in what you just said about town meeting and trying to get back to it, that's collaborative. So, I mean, one answer would be for whoever wants a petition to come forth to whatever the board is. And even if, I hope, and I feel this board would, even if it's not supported, there would be discussions to try to get things to a workable fashion. So that would be the first step in a collaborative town meeting type atmosphere. It's sort of a working together, even if we may not agree on the outcome type thing. So I respect your opinion, but I haven't changed mine.
I think to FX's point around Brattleboro, one of the reasons why it works there is because they are the only town in the state that uses a representative form of government. Okay, the only one. And so that should be very telling about design. It's neighborhood representation. It's even more direct. And it took them a long time to kind of get it to where it's working for them. I think my personal feeling, about the charter at this point is a lot of good work went into all of the revisions up to this point. I think pulling out the contested components makes sense to me, because then we could be like Burlington and renew our charter every year, because they do. No, now that was a little aside, but at the same time, because we're having some dissonance here with the two boards, and I don't think that I see consensus coming that quickly. We might come to consensus with those areas that we'd like to do some more work on. And that goes to your point, Peter, of the next cycle, because that's why it's there. That's why it exists. And that's why it's accepted by the legislature that towns will as they review their charters go, we still have work to do. It's always a work in progress. It's not a perfect science, but that's just a thought.
So, I'd like to move that we table this proposal. And that if another variant comes out of the conversation, which are going to happen with the select board, we can look at it again.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I second that. I didn't know if I could do it, because it was
Different hats.
different, so take that one off, put this one on.
So we have a motion on the floor to table the discussion to wait to get the response back from the select board, and we will move forward from there. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. And I think that's kind of in keeping with what Lisa was suggesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So, thank you very much, everyone, for all of
Yes,
this hard
thank you.
work. And Lisa, if you're with us, thank you so much for that in-depth review of the document and the work and your suggestions. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Lynn.
Nice to see you. I wrote your mom tonight.
Say hi to Chuck.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Take care. So that brings us to facilities.
Great. Russ, you want to do a little lead in about?
Sure, I'd love to do a little lead, and I haven't talked enough tonight.
Sure.
The facilities committee met last week, I believe it was, the time runs together. And we had a very productive discussion, and people can go into details because I see Jonathan's here, but I guess one thing to really state to the public is, as we go forth with our planning process, we're going forward with an idea of a comprehensive strategy. And as things are put forward, without making a commitment, we are thinking one or two steps ahead, so that we're not doing something today that gets torn up tomorrow type thing. So we want to do it right. We want to keep the state of our facilities as good as it is, and make it even better if possible, recognizing that just like everything else, we do have to be cognizant of costs. And we've identified certain projects that are important to the district, because we're investigating the bathrooms in the high school and the possibility of a gender neutral option for the high school students, while retaining, at least initially, as a trial, the more traditional facilities type arrangement. And we're looking at some of the buildings and making some judgments, saying in the long term, we may have a different plan, but for right now, there's certain things we need to do to maintain, protect, and make sense from a practical standpoint to do right now. And I guess for more detail, I'll turn it over to Tom or Jonathan.
Yeah, I asked Jonathan to come to kind of go through the status of things, so the board was up to date with where we're at. Not every little detail, but big picture. Sure. So Jonathan, usually when we're here, we speak from the microphone so that the audience can hear it out in Cyberland.
So following on what Russ said, color commentator. there's a couple of projects that have been hanging out there for a while. Probably best to start with those. The renovation of the guest room and the tech. I know that's been out there predates my arrival. But in recent months, that's kind of gotten some movement in the sales. We have a contract in place with the architect. Hold back some of the subcontracting that they were going to do, just to kind of keep it on a little bit lower scale. I spoke with the contractor BW, the pre-construction contract built earlier this week. They're on board. The only piece that's really pending is one of the things we pulled out of the architect's contract was the structural engineering, which is very minimal. So we're just going to handle that ourselves in-house. It's a minor piece. And Smith and Van Zandt has promised in their contract to have construction drawings by the end of January. So the goal is still to get this out on the street to bid this winter for work next year, with the understanding that unlike many academic projects, we're not necessarily bound to execute during the summer. That space is not critical program space at the moment. So we're not displacing a program to do the work. So I don't want to get held up or held down or held back. We'll get held anyway. By the traditional kind of summer crunch approach, we've got a little bit more flexibility, but it is moving ahead. And again, following on what Russ said about looking for kind of adjacencies and opportunities, one of the deferred issues that we have is sprinklers and fire alarms in high school and the tech that's been hanging out there for a while. We haven't, the fire marshal has been great to work with. We are doing our inspections over the winter break. He's involved in that. And the agreement we have is that even though it is not to code, it is safe. And as long as it is functional and we continue to prove that it is, we will. He's comfortable that it will work and keep everyone safe. The caveat is he's not going to put a signature on any building permits until we have a plan in place, which is a reasonable approach. So the adjacency is when we proceed with the best room, we have to concurrently have a solid plan to address those other deficiencies. And it's the right time to do it because there's probably some efficiency to be gained financially and otherwise in executing some of that work concurrent with the contractors being in place. So that's one that's been out there for a while. We've also talked at length, this also predates me, the roof work at Ottaquiche and Dothan Brook, which I know has been funded and hanging out there for some time. That traveled around a little bit, but has settled into a much more conservative approach, not replacing in kind, but not a major rebuild of roof structures. Kind of, it is what it is. It's safe. It's okay. We're not going to reinvent the wheel, but I did meet with an architect earlier this week to come up with just a simple specification for product and application that we can put out to bid, not to a general contractor. We're not rebuilding anything. Do a single bid project or a single contractor project. And the thinking there is, while there is definitely other work to be done in those buildings, they show their age and they were built in an era when things moved at speed. So we have some deferred issues there. There's no point in addressing any of them if the roof isn't intact. So I'm not losing touch of the boilers or the windows or the heating control. That's not gone, but first things first, get a roof on top. And then the idea is to put them out to bid since they are related enough to be bid as a unit, even though we may not be able to execute one season. With the market being what it is and fluctuations in contracting costs, I'd be more comfortable if we had the whole thing in ink, even if it takes 2 years to execute. So that's the plan there. The other thing we touched on a little bit in terms of long-term planning is kind of the Highland Ave properties, Tenny House maintenance, couple superintendent office, and keep going if you can. And the idea there has been to just look at what the highest value occupancy is. We talked about, the superintendent's office is what it is, but we're not going to find more economical central office space in the Upper Valley. So it's worth keeping that building safe and sound. Again, not dramatic improvements, no, we don't need to make it anything more than it is, but we need to keep it what it is, because it's a good deal right now. And the rest of those facilities, just keeping a safe holding pattern without making a lot of investment until we have a more comprehensive plan for kind of how the whole front yard looks there. The gender diverse restrooms, since our last conversation, I've reached out to other facilities directors in the state through some communication to the Superintendent's Association, and got actually a lot of really positive and helpful response very, very quickly. This is something that other schools are moving on with haste. And I've made the comment about when this becomes an issue, I would rather respond to the call with a plan than a promise. So Burlington just executed and did, from what I understand, a fairly good job. They learned some lessons, it was well received. So I reached out to them about, kind of what would you do different. Other folks have shared some concept drawings that they've got. So basically, what we talked about last week was coming up with a basis of design and looking into both the kind of the construction nuance and then the operational complications that come with this type of facility. And what I've learned very quickly is that a lot of that work is done, and I'm happy to be a safe second. So I'm kind of gathering that together. Hopefully the next time we meet as a group, I can put that out there and say, here's a path that someone else has kind of, even if they haven't paved it, it's clear. The other thing that we spoke about in the kind of high level planning is looking at very long term, kind of the athletic facilities. We know we need to do something with the locker rooms that kind of ties in with the restrooms. We know we have to do something with the floor that ties in with multiple use. So it's nothing that's going to happen right now, but I think it's important to keep track of because there's so many touch points. It even ties into what happens with those Highland Ave facilities, because if the use or access changes, the parking changes, it all needs to be considered. So no immediate action there, but certainly something that's on the radar. Other than that, there's just a bunch of deferred maintenance, but nothing catastrophic. A lot of work to do, but it's identified work. And the challenge is figuring out a financial plan that works, and working now on just kind of a comprehensive list of everything we got that's out there in terms of not operations, but capital repairs, capital improvements that either need to be done to just maintain, or should be done to get us to an appropriate current state. And there's some crossover there. And then always looking at, there's considerations. There's the, I don't want to let anything slide that's going to become dramatically more expensive, or could present a failure that negatively impacts the facilities and programs. Obviously, don't want that to happen. But at the same time, being just realistic about what we can do and what we can put off without. There's some stuff that we know we're going to do. It's never going to get less expensive. We should just find a way to do it. There's other stuff that we know we're going to do, but there might be some adjacent programs we should look at or impacts we should look at before we just proceed. So I think the effort on projects is, as I said, and just kind of more general state of things is trying to get a comprehensive list and start to prioritize them in a meaningful way and make it kind of a predictable problem. One thing I just wanted to add this because it made me feel marginally better about the whole situation. In the last week, I've had 2 architects and engineer in our schools who've never been here before, and I've never met before. So clean slate, which is helpful for me because I've only been here a year. A lot of people have been here a long time, and all 3 of them, while the issues they looked at are significant, we need their help. All 3 of them, unsolicited, made the comment that for the schools they've been in, our schools look pretty good, which made me feel like, all right, that's nice to hear. If that's just kind of a cold comment, all right, we're okay.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. I think one of the, because we've been around, as you can tell. But thinking back when we first hired Tom, so that's 12 years roughly ago. One of the things the board and Tom agreed on was that we needed to have a baseline to start from. So a lot of the engineering work that we requested that was done, then gave us a pretty good, let's say foundation of where we were at. And then what we started working on from there was a 25-year maintenance plan. And then looking at how do we, like you said, come up with the capital to move it forward. So I think we've tried to keep that front and center because we didn't want to find ourselves in a position where we have to build a whole new building, like some of our colleague districts are doing, because they deferred it so long that it just you can only kick the can down the road so long before it falls out apart. It's got so dented it won't spin anymore. So I appreciate your continued effort in that area.
I think one other factor that's interesting right now is I don't certainly the economic environment is very different than it's been in a long time, and that's adding some pressure. The other thing that's happening, not just in Vermont, but all over the place, is whether it's COVID or fuel prices, the state is pushing some stuff down pretty quickly that is going to be significant. There's a mandate out there that by January 24 we don't have fluorescent bulbs anymore. We'll see. I think it's the right thing to do. I just don't know that we can do it. So some of that stuff, I think, as we look at projects, keeping those regulatory things in mind, I would rather choose how we comply than wait for the mandate and be forced to comply in a certain way. So that's.
I would urge, the board, as we talk about any sort of fund balance from last year, to consider the reserve funds, because even though you've made a concerted effort to fill the reserve funds, it's still, I think, woefully short of what we need to do the roofs, what we need to fix some of the deferred maintenance. It's amazing how much, you have a lot of property and you have a lot of facility, and it's hard to keep up with it all.
Well, the thing is, I think this board continually goes back to that baseline, that's one of our most important assets, and we have to, it isn't a can, we should, we have to, and we have to find a way, and that's something that, boards for a while have been working towards. So it's not falling on deaf ears. So, I think, as we look at the report and we balance those needs and revenue, we can further have that, that next step discussion.
We'll take a look at EL4. I know it's in the consent agenda, but one of the things I do is outline the reserve funds, and we have 415,654 for the roofs. That's not going to cut it. So yeah.
And the thing is, we know that, that's the other thing. It's one thing, going, oh, we didn't, we've been doing those, this isn't our first.
Yeah, Jake's going to talk a little bit about adding about $400,000 to facilities expense, but that's needed for all the sort of little things that add up during the year. So just something for you to really think about.
Well, I would like to thank Jonathan and Tom for the work they're doing with the facilities committee. And I think the other thing, just to mention, as part of our long range considerations, we're also considering that the auditorium needs work as well. So that may be something that gets packaged in or planned in conjunction with some of this other work type thing. So we've identified a lot of areas that in the perfect world, we would fund now, but it's far from a perfect world. So we have to be cognizant of the cost.
You know, the auditorium is a pretty good example of there's some significant deferred work there. It just hasn't been done for whatever it doesn't matter what that we just have to do. You know, the fire marshal came in, Bisbee came in and said, this is what you're gonna do. All right, that's what we do. So we're gonna figure out the best way to do it, and we'll make that place work. But while we're doing that, keeping in mind your point about what's the future look like. You know, I don't want to buy anything today that we're gonna.
Well, it's like you said with the alarm. You know, there's components within the alarm system that aren't going to change. And if we're in a position to do the retro now in any of the areas, it's easier to add on as you're moving through. If you get the big modules, you know, the multi-$1,000 components in as you can do that, you know, so, you know, I think our thinking around that collectively is in line with each other. So we just, you know, we'll just keep the ball moving in a positive way, because that's what we kind of do here. But thank you guys.
Yes, thank you very
It's,
much.
you know, you kept us in a good position, because I get to see all those other places. So I don't know what you mean.
I'm still riding on an inheritance.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for waiting.
You're the new quarterback. So just-
The old team.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. So
We're gonna do the first draft of the new
Yeah.
ends reporting.
right, so that we can get Dr. R out of here. So I guess
Yeah.
we'll move
So,
on.
Little
pulling up the
preamble,
present, yeah.
we took a stab at it. We listened to what the board said last year in the retreat. Probably Julie's introduction to the board. But, you know, we just really want the feedback and comments. Is it too much detail? Is it not enough? Is it what you were looking for? And continue on this track for the rest of the information you seek or not. So we're not going to be offended if there's an issue with it. At all.
We're just pulling up the presentation, but and one of the things I just wanted to share when I was working on this is we got some, you know, great feedback about how to report on the ends from you all, and thinking about including different types of data, looking at sort of a breadth of things happening in the district and sort of really speaking directly to aspects of the ends policy. And so we had also decided that we would focus on just two this year to try this out: academic excellence and health and well-being. And so I was realizing that if I were to tell you everything related to academic excellence and provide all of the data that we had to share, it would be hours and hours of reporting. So just thinking about sort of honing in on one piece that we could sort of, you know, tell the story around for this as an example. So just as a review of what this ends policy is related to academic excellence, it's that students will perform at a high level in these crucial areas of academic expertise: reading, written and verbal communication, problem solving skills in math, and so on. And knowing that we're going to continue to update these how these are worded and written as this year goes on, but we're still working with these right now. And I highlighted problem solving skills based on math because I wanted to, again, sort of focus on the story around what's happening in math in the district right now, thinking that would be just a nice place to sort of start. So I then pulled out what target and indicators related to math we might be looking for if we're looking in the data and looking at what's happening across the district. And so these are the ones that seem most salient to students' work in math and their mathematical problem solving and reasoning. So that they are, using a variety of different ways of communicating their mathematical thinking, a variety of strategies to solve problems, thinking critically and innovating. So thinking, innovatively and creatively around math problems and math contexts. And so what I wanted to share with you all was around this policy and these indicators are our district data, just benchmark data related to math. But also what it looks like when a student is doing these things, is showing academic excellence in math, as well as how teachers are responding to the data and to their professional learning in order to continue to support students in their mathematical conceptual understandings and growth along trajectory. So just really quickly, and we can just sort of go through these pretty quickly, but just what these next two slides are fall to students pre-K through 2, but not all schools use the kindergarten one right away in the fall because students are so new to school, and it's just maybe not the best indicator at that time. But what you're seeing is basically just the breakdown. Those bars on the left side show the different aspects of mathematical numeracy that we're looking at in the primary grades. So forward sequences, backward sequences, symbolic numbers and place value estimation and operations. And so basically you're just looking at students who at the very beginning of the fall came into school with proficiency in these areas or needing some intervention. And so that the green and the blue at the top are showing the percentages of students across the district in first grade that were meeting or exceeding. And then moving on to second grade, which is the next one, you'll see again, and what I mean, and this is one of those bright spot moments where you can really see how as students are progressing through the primary grades, they're consolidating their numeracy. And this is really wonderful data that is showing that almost 75% of students coming into second grade are proficient or above in their numerical understandings. And then moving into, so the PNOA we just used to grade 2 and then we switched to STAR. And so this is STAR math data. And this is from the fall. Their teachers are right in the middle of administering the winter benchmark now. So we'll have new updated data. So this is actually, from a while ago at this point, but we don't have the most updated yet. So this is just showing students that are showing proficiency or above. And for this indicator and these particular data points, it's showing students that are at the 40th percentile ranking or above. So it's a pretty big, margin. So the percentage of students that are meeting or exceeding that are pretty high. These numbers can be sort of, you can look at it in some different ways, depending on how you look at those percentile rankings. But third grade, we're showing across the district that, again, 64% are at that 40th percentile ranking or above. And then the same thing for fourth grade, even, higher percentage. And then going on to fifth grade, again, around 60%. So a couple of things about that, those are great percentages. They tend to be in line or above what the state is showing, and that we don't have STAR data at a statewide level because it's nationally normed, so they don't break it down by state. But we can sort of compare it to old SBAC data or something like that, and it's pretty in line or better. Of course, it's not where we want it to be. We want to see 100% of our students meeting proficiency. I mean, that's always our goal. And so what I would like to talk to you about is some of the amazing things going on in our district to really look at data in this way and use it to increase teacher practice around math and supporting students, movement along sort of that math learning progression. But before that, I wanted to show you a couple of videos, if you don't mind, and we have the time to do this, of what this looks like in practice for a student. Now, this is a kindergartner, and this is a student. We have parental permission to show this. They were very excited, actually. This is a student, and I show this because this is a 5-year-old who is showing academic excellence in her mathematical reasoning, communication, problem solving, critical thinking. And so just sort of highlighting that these ENDS policies are being enacted, all the way through, even with our kindergartners. So go ahead. Hopefully the sound will work and everything. Oh. We don't have sound, do we?
1 second. Apologize.
While he's doing that, though, sorry. I love how this child, like how they've got the dry erase markers and eraser on the table so that she can just right away on the table as she's solving the problem.
Okay. I apologize.
If it doesn't work, I can talk through what she's doing.
Want to do that?
Sure. So the problem was this was done in October, and the teacher asked, I have 22 Reese's peanut butter cups. And I got, I can't remember, is it 7? It's 15 more. How many do I have? And so there's all these materials out on the table, and this little girl basically, and that's all that the teacher says. And so she immediately goes, so these cubes are broken apart, and you can see there's some singles and some tens, and she's working on like, what operation am I doing? What am I doing? I'm putting these numbers together. Oh. And then the next thing she does, which is this is that, mathematical reasoning. She's grabbing tens. She's grabbing tens right away. Those are rods of 10 to make the 22. And then she takes a 10. Now she's making the 15. And rather than pull over 5 ones, she takes a 10 and she breaks it in half, which is just incredible mathematical reasoning. And now she's putting it all together. And the really neat thing that she does, she goes 1, 2, 3, and then she goes, you'll see her count again. She said, oh, no, 10, 20, 30. And she counts them up. And gets her answer. And so I just wanted to share that there's another one there too that is available in the slideshow, that because she did this with such, just because she was doing things like, I know she had to go back and fix her 7. She was not happy. She's like, no, I got to fix it. But because she was able to do that with such facility, and she was really like, she was able to sort of put a 10 together. She didn't have to count that 10. She knew it was 10. Because she could do things like that, the teacher then asked her, and I can't remember the exact problem, but basically, had a starting number and then said, and then I got some more. And then I had this many. And she was able to reuse even the numbers that she had before to then solve the second problem. So I just share that in the sense of that sort of academic excellence in mathematical, the mathematical reasoning, the critical thinking, the creativity, all of that happening for this child, this 5-year-old in this context. So a couple of things that are happening to really support one of the things that just that video really exemplifies is that child was entering that math problem at a certain place along a mathematical learning progression. There are things that she had in place in her conceptual understanding that allowed her to put tens together and that sort of thing. And so that's really what we are trying to foster and support in terms of math, is that we're able to really understand where students are along a learning progression, so that when we're teaching and, using the curriculum, we are meeting all students where they're at in a strengths-based way to then move them along to the next step and the next step and the next step, and that they can access the same problem, but maybe from lots of different entry points. So we have a group of teachers right now at White River that are engaged in this work in a really intentional way. And I'm sharing this because it's really showing how we are working to increase that academic excellence in math, to really support that. They are engaged in something called a networked improvement community. And what that is just a really focused cohort model where teachers are learning and working together. It's really guided by improvement science. They're really, it's a very coordinated effort. They're bringing data, they're looking at student work, and they're using it to guide their next instructional decisions. And this is all in math. And we have teachers pre-K through grade 3 that are participating, including special educators. And so what they're doing is they're meeting and each month they bring videos of students. They talk through what they see the students doing. They offer suggestions and ideas and say, where is this child at this point and where would we take them next? And it's just a great way for them to really increase their math learning so that they can then increase, it'll be reflected in their practice. And they also, we have this incredible opportunity to have Doug Clements and Julie Sarama, who are just foundational people in early math research and teaching. And so they join us for these sessions and they're phenomenal. I mean, this is, they're almost like celebrities. So it's pretty exciting when we're able to meet with them. So I actually had their textbook from college. So this is one example of how we're engaging in work that then goes back to support that mathematical excellence. And so some of the exciting things is that to share about that has been such a great offering. And this is an affiliation with the Vermont AOE too. That the AOE is offering more sessions of this starting in January, and we have 2 more cohorts of teachers across the district that are jumping on and joining. So we have an upper elementary group at Dothan Brook, and we have a middle school group, all so excited in this work and really thinking about how we extend our own learning to then extend students' learning.
Miss cookies? Ladies, where's our cookies? Come on. Sorry, Julie.
Not at all. Cookies are way more important. So I just wanted to share this too. This isn't specific to math, but it came out of the work that we've been doing as part of this network improvement community. We actually, a teacher at White River and I were able to go down to Washington, D.C. and attend a convening affiliated with this and share some of the work and engage in some additional work around where we were going next with this. And we happened to share that there are some principals in the district that are really piloting a sort of different model of teacher professional learning and evaluation that is really based on a more partnership oriented model where teachers and principals will sit down, have goal setting meetings, that they sort of set goals for themselves based on evidence that they're seeing in their students, places in their practice where they would like to grow and improve. And then the principal's really acting as a partner in that and saying, what resources can I provide? How can I provide time or collaboration? And then there's follow-up and mini observations and sort of outcomes that are looked at for sort of maybe 8 weeks, out. So we'll come back together in 8 weeks and we'll see how it's going. And we'll look at that goal again and see if there's, it needs to be revised or if it's still applicable. So we happened to mention that was something that really sort of resonated with the cycles of improvement that they were promoting in this convening that we went to around math. And they were so excited. The AOE was so excited to hear about this that they've invited us to present about it at a national convening in January. So, and they said to us, we would really like to codify that. Like, we'd really like to talk to you more about that. So that's pretty exciting. So we're so we're very excited about that. Some other next steps in just thinking about like how this all sort of like ties together. So really looking at continuing to strengthen that early numeracy so that we can continue to strengthen, that foundational piece to support mathematical learning later on, so that students are getting those foundations and those conceptual understandings early on to increase across the grades. We, as I mentioned, we have this January convening where we're going to actually be sharing out a little bit about our teacher reflection and goal setting. We've also been invited to visit a school district in Oregon that is doing some of this work too, and to partner with them. And so that's really exciting. There's also continued opportunity for this work with literacy as well, and just to continue to add more teachers, more cohorts to this, so that that sort of constant cycle of using student evidence to improve practice, to then revisit, and just that cycle of improvement all the time. And we're really looking at using that to sort of create a really intentional pre-K to 8 framework for math, so that, regardless of curriculum that we're using, we really deeply understand how students move through those mathematical progressions. That might be it. Yep. So that was that was it. That was our sort of first attempt to sort of tell a story around an ENDS policy in a way that had some different data points and some ways that we as a district are engaging in that.
So hopefully, one of the goals in all of this is to come to that conclusion that we've been talking about for a while, and it's, what does a picture of a graduate look like?
Yeah, right, right.
And needless to say, this is part of that picture.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
And thank you for the work, and please share that, with the early learning educators.
I sure will.
Because that's the foundation.
Yeah.
We don't get it right there.
Yeah.
It's not that it can't be, addressed later,
Right.
but it's a lot harder.
It's a lot harder. Right. And I just want to just highlight the work that all these teachers that are, all of our teachers, but just, those that are engaging this work are thinking so deeply and carefully, and just using such a strengths-based approach to how they look at student work and student growth. So it's just really inspiring.
That disaggregation of the data and, collating and moving it forward, into instructional delivery.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's rock, that's rock star stuff, so that's pretty cool. Sir.
All right, this is great start. However, I think it's something we could build upon, especially if we have a goal as a presentation at the February budget meeting. I think one thing I would like to see is maybe a chart or something that specifically goes through where we're at, where a benchmark would be, and like on a single page, so we can demonstrate the progression amongst the grades. Yeah. The other thing I think would be important is to state a goal, whether it be each year we hope to retain at a level or add 2% to the proficiency level, whatever is appropriate.
Yeah.
Because we want to strive for improvement.
Agreed.
And then another part of that would be, and I think it's an excellent choice, but rationalize how the problem solving, I've lost it. Oh, right here. Basically, the what you have here on the academic excellent math target, that works into all subject areas. You need problem solving in science. You need critical thinking in social studies, that type of thing. And the ability to read obviously goes across disciplines. So if we had something that says we can't do it all, we've chosen to focus here because there's a lot, and I'll use a buzzword, transferable skills. And this is how we're focusing on, and here's how we're measuring ourselves and can report to the taxpayers where we're at. So I guess the last thing I would add is then think about how we can use this in progression with the middle school, then the high school. Because I mean, at various levels. So I think this is a great start to something that could really be meaningful in answering the question, how do you know?
Yeah, and I really appreciate that comment because I agree 100% with you and think that really what our next step would be is like to think about, okay, those numbers that we have, what is that like? What do we want to see? What do we want to see next? Okay, that's where we are. Great, but where do we go? Because clearly, as I said, our ultimate goal is always going to be that we're reaching 100% of our students. So what is a reasonable and attainable and measurable next step from here? One of the things I think also just speaking to what you said is that, additional data that we can bring is, so what happened between the fall and the winter? What does that look like? And we'll have that. And that will be a really interesting, and that will help inform next steps in terms of that goal setting piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be the means of, let's say, justifying if we need an interventionist or another teacher in math or whatever. And if we stay consistent, because I mean, obviously you as professional educators make the choice as to what indicator you're going to use, then you rationalize it to us as a board who rationalizes it to the public. But over a 2-year period, as we develop more data, we'll be able to say, okay, third graders were here in 2022. Now we're here in 2023. So it's another indicator of the improvement that we know is happening, but we haven't been able to document.
And we can get some of that from the STAR, the data itself, because you can sort of follow a cohort. So that is another layer that we can bring. Is sort of looking at how a particular cohort of students may be progressing through the grades as well.
And from the sounds, with success, it breeds more success. So as you continue to grow this work, more teachers are going to get involved. That's the end product. Because how could you not want to be part of that? And so that's the other piece of this. It begets good behavior and best practice, and it keeps replicating itself. And if we keep doing that, that those winning combinations start to just become part of the culture. And that's what we're talking about, is creating that. So yes,
and just like when we have our 25-year plan with facilities, when you're looking at all of these numbers that you can maneuver all around, but to think about planning ahead, how are we going to continue not only to get the good results, but how are we going to get better results? And I would like to see us have a plan that's further along than just a year. What's it going to look like next year? Well, what's it going to look like next year? Well, what's it going to look like 5 or 10 years down the road? And I know that's a lot of planning and thinking about curriculum and how are we going to help the students. But there's so much research out there to help us to get to that kind of planning. And I think that that's really important. I think we've seen that because of COVID. That we need to be planning out there in that future too. And which then comes right back to the budget. If we're going to do this, then we're probably going to need to hire some more teachers or whatever. But I just keep relating it to the facilities, and I'm thinking, oh, we've done all this planning and we know exactly what we're going to do, and we've got some money set aside. So I would think I'm not in your position, but I would think that that would be one of the things that we could be looking at. I, as a board member, would like to look at that.
I think, yes, I agree. And I think it is something that we can do very intentionally and look at. So, you know, if we know this is where we are now,
Mhm.
where could we be by the end of the year? But what are all the sort of cycles within that could kind of get us there in a measurable and attainable way? But also, as you're saying, you know, we can look beyond that too. And so, and I think the other piece that I would like to really see is that when we're looking at, you know, the numbers, that we're bringing in multiple forms of data so that we're really understanding, you know, okay, so we're looking at this 40% that didn't meet the benchmark. But within that 40% from benchmark to benchmark, what are we seeing them do? There might still be growth in there, and that's pretty exciting. What other data can we bring in that helps support the picture around those students? And then, you know, are there patterns within that we can really notice that would help us in our instruction as well? So I think that, you know, when we can really dig into all those different questions and look at some of those things with a real inquiry mindset around what does this mean? What are we looking at? You know, where do we want to be and mapping that out? I think that's really going to create the most equitable outcomes for our students.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything to add to what's already been said, other than this is what we've been looking for a number of years, and it's nice to see it finally arriving.
Yes, it is.
You know, and we understand that it's like baking, you know, bread. You know, you walk into the kitchen and you go, whoa, you know it's getting there. You know, so we've been kneading, dough, letting it settle for the last few years. You know, right? So now we're starting to see the fruit of the labor.
Just one more quick thing I'll add that just sort of speaks to that continuous improvement too, is that we really have some great momentum happening with our coaches in terms of supporting this work, where they are really using that inquiry mindset and that cycle of looking at data in team meetings to really set goals for the next. So in 4 weeks when we meet again, where would we like to be? And so I just want to, you know, share that is happening in a really intentional way within buildings.
So that being said, to go back to what Russ was talking about and looking at, you know, our presentation, you know, to the public around, you know, how we're performing. You know, that's a powerful piece.
Yeah.
You know, because if the community can look and go, wow, yeah, you know, my kids seem to be doing okay, you know, and that's why they're doing it. I mean, sometimes when you put the pieces together, it makes sense, you know, and so that helps support the work of the district and the expense, you know, that it.
Exactly, because I mean, a lot of times when people complain about their taxes, it's what am I getting for my dollar
Exactly.
versus the actual tax itself,
Right.
within limits, of course, but it's what am I getting? And this is a means of demonstrating that the good your tax dollar is doing and why it's an investment in Hartford's future.
And what's interesting is, you know, after standing out in the cold so many years, having people ask that question, you know, and to be able to say, we're working on indicators, and have somebody say, what do you mean? What does that look like? And to say that we're formulating them. Now we can say we have them. And here's the result of what it is. You know, and it might warm up the weather outside.
They might bring you a pot of coffee.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes, thank you.
very much.
So, really, let's let's see if we can get Jacob. On the docket so we can get him out of here.
I'll be here for executive session.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and Roy was gonna go through the ESSER spending real quick.
You want that next?
Yeah.
Please.
Because it leads into the budget, so I thought it should be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
it's a good follow-up from what, Julie just shared. It's kind of like, it's a good story. The storyline continues.
The continuing saga.
Yeah. The budget story is
The trials and tribulations. Okay, I'm punchy. Go ahead.
I think we're all kind of getting a little bit there.
We're not far enough along yet for that.
That's the scary part. We've been here 3 hours already.
We get involved quickly is what you're trying to warn me. So what we have here is, as we're starting to look at ESSER and talking about the impacts and how we've used the money, it's just outlining what did we start with. So if you were to look at just the cover page, is just trying to put into perspective that we had 255,000 approximately, and then the second influx was just over $1 million, and then the last influx was approximately 2.4. And to try and update you folks with how was it used, and something that you can go back and look at any point, because it's shared in the folder. But these are all things that we've shared in community engagement meetings over the time. But I just thought that if anybody in the community or you wanted to be able to see it in one sheet, I thought this would be useful for that. But the place I really want to focus our energy on is probably the one you can say, is 3. So the 2.4, remember Kathy and I laid out that 20% of that was mandated that we had to set that aside for extended learning. So 478,000 was set aside immediately, whether we had an immediate use for it or not. That the planning is always dedicated to how can we create extended learning opportunities. To date, we've spent just short of 1.6 of the funds, 90 of the extended learning. So when people start to wonder what's left, because that's always a question that people are interested in, there's just short of 350 that's left for spending outside of extended learning, and we have 388,000 left for extended learning opportunities. When it comes to staffing, some of the staffing that was funded this year with that money, that the 1.5, we have a mental health clinician, student assistance professional, which is folks may be hearing SAP, which is they're helping students with a lot of substance. You folks have heard that vaping is pretty intense, and that's one of the things that these folks really focus on. We have 5 behavioral interventionists. We partnered with HCRS temporarily to provide some more classroom supports. Extended learning. One of the ways that we found to try and create some opportunities that we haven't had in the past is the use of tutoring. So offering access to educational opportunities that are outside the traditional school day. So in some cases, that's where the school day is not working, and they can access some learning opportunities outside the day. Translation services. The great news is, as we try and diversify our community, is making sure we're meeting the needs of the community and translating documents using interpretive services in meetings. We've set aside money to help making sure we're meeting those needs. Flexible furniture. a couple of the schools. We tried to talk about ways, and we talked about this in a previous ESSER meeting, was finding creative ways to utilize funds that aren't positional. Because positional is not a fixed cost and it continues. Whereas if you think outside the box and think of intervention in terms of the furniture as a way to impact the students, the furniture will live for years. So just when you see flexible furniture, that's some of the ways that people are trying to think, how can I create an intervention, but for physical items as opposed to human beings. We're growing our pre-K program. We added 2.5 professionals there. We did bring in two more interventionists and one instructional coach, one FTE. That's not necessarily one human being, but portions of positions that add up to one full-time coach. The instructional coaches, just so you know, you'll hear later in today, they tie into our EL 10 as well. So summer school, this was really something that Kathy really worked on, was working with the IMS, the Immersion Montessori School. And we picked up the tuition for students to attend for the last 2 years. So that's where, when you see IMS, it was picking up the tuition for all students. Once again, we put tutoring and after school programs in there. I think that for ESSER to do its job, which is trying to meet the needs that COVID has brought to us, we've had to be creative in terms of how do we re-engage students with school where it hasn't worked. And so we really do, we have, and that's where the 388 that's still set aside is really going to come in handy. We piloted having an occupational therapist available for the early childhood programs. And we brought in some K-5 professional development around the ELA curriculum. We brought some PD around co-teaching, universal design for learning, and I believe now we've also have some science of reading that is coming in as well. And one last additional position was an ELL teacher. So once again, as we start to increase our needs in that area, we really did need a second person because we had one professional that was in charge of all the schools in the district. So it's not efficient to do that much travel, but also having a second person has allowed some collaboration in that area, which I think has been critical as well. So that's kind of an overview of how we've spent the money, and also giving you an idea of what we have left.
So one of the, again, this fits into our overall budget discussion, as well. When we start looking at recommendations for the things that the administrative team feels most in support after ESSER goes away. And that's something that we have to be really cognizant of. And hopefully, we'll have data to support that, investment, that it's provided. So, like you said, the reading data is coming and stuff, so.
Yeah, you'll see that in the new items in the budget.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
So just so you folks know, the chart, I also the slideshow that's available to you, I also broke it out this way so that it's just 2 different ways depending on how you like to view what's there. But this breaks it out in terms of positions, how the consulting and PD was used, and the extended learning opportunities, all the stuff we just talked about in the chart, but just a different way to look at it depending on which way works best for you.
Cool.
I think that leads into Jacob possibly. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Roy. Great
Thank you,
job.
Roy.
Well, I'll get out the darts for Jacob.
Jacob, do you have anything you need presented from the?
Yeah,
From the
probably
folder?
the stuff from the folder that should be in the room. Before
You want to get in what?
FY 24. Exactly what it's called.
So,
Yeah.
all right, Jacob, I'm with you. So this is just a summary page for this next iteration of the budget. Not much has changed, but I will highlight what has. At this point, we do know who is moving up on the salary schedule as far as, you know, who's been working on their credits and everything. So that's an increase of $11,238. You'll notice down below that we have added some positions for the board's request that, you know, hey, what would it look like if we kept this stuff going? So we have the SAP at the high school. 71,759. We have an interventionist at DBS, $105,411. The mental health clinician at the high school, $95,000. We want to keep the ELL about $112,000. So those are just some of the changes for the additional positions that we would be looking at to carry on from SO3 to the local budget potentially. As far as the specific facility repairs for 400,000, that's just a district level view of 400,000. Jonathan and I certainly need to meet to go through, and I know he's been working on a plan as far as, you know, what's red, yellow, green, red, you know, the stuff that we really need to take care of different now versus, you know, the yellow and green stuff that we can kind of defer later on to work in a better position. The next two pages are just a breakout of the object and function summaries. If there's any questions there, I'm happy to answer that. But if there's not, we'll jump into the tax page as we start to get, you know, information and yields and numbers of, you know, what is the snapshot at this point, what the tax rate would look like, given the information that we have and some of the assumptions that we make. So we did get draft one of the equalized pupil 1.30923. That's representing a decrease of 36.7 students, and everyone else is going, how can that have dropped? And I think everyone is saying that. We're all wondering the same thing with our numbers going up, but this is just the first draft.
Our data shows an increase of about 40 students. Pre-K through 12. So that shows you this disparity between the way that we calculate actual students and the way the state calculates equalized pupils.
So to simplify it, we count by actual student bodies, whereas the state uses weight students by grade, by
poverty, homelessness,
So
English language learner.
and the state's going through a transition in how they calculate those weights. And initially, we thought we were going to come out ahead. Right now, it doesn't look that way, but as Jacob stressed, this is the first round, and it's possible that number is going to go up, which would be to our advantage.
The feedback has been that in this first draft, they did not get all the external information from the other entities that they needed. So obviously, there are definitely some kids out there that they're missing as far as the weights and accounting go.
But I just want to make sure the board knows that we do have 40 additional students over last year. So we have, I think it's 35 K through 12, and then we have 5 tuition students, additional tuition.
Well, that was the report you had made after the October count, because we were waiting for the October count. And, you know, we're clear on that. And one of the things that will try to give some thought to, and those of us that will be doing any work with Russ on the presentation, you know, we'll look at, you know, how does that happen? And simplify how does that happen? Because we're talking about one person who was charged with designing that formula that represents 87,000 kids. So that being said, the first draft could be a little shaky. And usually is.
So wait a minute, Lanny's here, so I think he volunteered to do the school presentation. I had to try, sorry.
Oh, we just lost our guest.
Take his cookies.
That's what he gets for not sharing.
One assumption that we're making in this iteration of the budget is the CLA dropping down to 70%. We won't actually know what the CLA is at the end of the month. But Russ wanted to see a decrease in what that could have on the budget potentially. We did get the draft of the yields for this year. The yields were much higher because they have all this extra money and for the save law and everything, if they have the money, they which we're spending money. So the yields are inflated and everything looks good. So, but you know, you have decreased equalized pupils, decreased CLA. Obviously, that's going to drive up the tax rates. So presently, at this current snapshot with a lot of draft numbers, we would potentially be looking at a 12.1% increase on property taxes and a 5.8% increase on income. Again, that's going to be interesting.
Repeat that, please. I thought that would wake you up. There again.
12.1% increase on property taxes and 5.8% on the income base.
However, Lanny, just to walk you down from the ledge, this is with, we haven't looked at the difficult choices in terms of cost yet. And there's still some very preliminary numbers. So Jacob is absolutely right that we're using this based on incomplete, if not horrible information at this point.
And one of the other things that you heard Jacob refer to is we wanted to look at the potentially most drastic CLA number, because that common level of appraisal, as you well know, if it goes down, tax rate goes up. And if it goes up, the tax rate goes down. It is that simple. So if we're in a situation where we're in that downward trend, the potential for it, going up it's mathematical, it just happens. So every other factor that you put into changing that rate then becomes decisions we make, so that's that. The fun part of budgeting.
May I ask when you get closer to real numbers?
We'll get the actual CLA at the end of the month. And that should give us a better picture. Certainly, as we start to get to the end of negotiation, we'll finalize some of those issues. We can actually say, the increase is going to be X. We'll know have a better idea of what those next numbers are.
Probably each meeting will get a more accurate equalized pupil count too.
Yeah.
Right.
I think this one is wrong. But
It is.
we like to report what we have right now. So
It's a snapshot in time.
it's hard because you gotta ask. Yeah, I mean, you gotta ask the people to hang in there with us and you'll see them move quite a
It's
bit
lot of
probably.
guesswork on both sides.
But we have nothing else than to report what we have right now. So
And
this is what we
sometimes
have.
the numbers even change after they're settled.
Right.
We'll say this is the final.
And
And that's what the tax rate we're bringing to the taxpayers is. And then the state goes and changes something, and sometimes we go Yahoo. And sometimes you go, oh
Well,
God.
you can look at the bottom of the sheet and look at last year and the year before's property and income. And you'll see how the numbers have shifted because they're extremely low. So the reality of what actually occurred at the end of the day with school tax rate is right there.
That's your question, John.
Yeah,
With the government funds, we're still looking at that much increase.
because the ESSER funds are drying up.
I understand that.
Yeah, so that's why we're actually,
Service.
right, we're trying to shift some of the. Yeah, and that's why, I mean, the budget, I'm trying to be like, okay, so we found what worked in ESSER. Do you want to continue funding it? Is one, adding it on top of what we've got.
Whether it's sustainable.
Right, adding it on top of what we got. Do you want me to look at trimming somewhere? To, you know, maybe keep some of that, maybe decrease in other places or decrease some of what we've asked for. Or fund it back to the level without ESSER position.
Because I mean,
So you're right. I mean, what the big rub is, what about next year? How do you sustain this?
yeah, the yield is gonna go, is probably gonna go down next year because they won't have the same surplus at the state level. And the frustrating thing, and this has been the case every year that I've been on the board, is the numbers change. We're almost right to the point where we actually have to vote whatever that final budget is.
So they changed afterwards.
Yeah, I know they changed afterwards, but even during the process,
Yeah.
so.
Sorry, Tom, I don't mean to speak out of turn.
No, it's that we're just trying to be transparent here. And I guess the problem is, even though the ESSER funds have dried up, the need has not.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of social and emotional issues as a result of the pandemic that we're gonna have to make tough choices. It really, I'd switch places with you. That's how bad it is.
Town side of things, though, the ARPA funds, we're trying to look at, one-time expenses to offset. And like, the biggest thing is capital improvement. I mean, the ESSER funds are not available for that need within the school system. They're only available for student-related funding.
No, there was choice there.
And some of it was spent, but I mean, we had the immediate need for the social and emotional help for the students. Ideally, if we could have, we would have done exactly what you're talking about at the town level, understanding it's a limited time source of funding. And if you could, you would invest that in capital projects that wouldn't have a reoccurring consequence. We didn't have that option.
No, we should have sort of a trifecta of issues. Well, the pandemic and the social emotional issues that were presented in families and kids because of the pandemic and the impact on the academic, achievement. So it was like triple whammy.
Some districts though really put themselves in a very, very tough place. Instead of spending the money to say, we need to hire people to deal with the impact on kids' behavior or something. They said, we got to maintain or increase the salaries of our teachers just so we'll have teachers, which means that they created a much higher level of pay for teachers, which may or may not have been necessary, but now they're going to have to try to maintain that going forward. We have the option of saying we needed the psychological help for some period of time. It's now maybe lesser of a need, not gone away, but maybe lesser, or we can look at lots of choices, but we haven't locked ourselves in quite the same way some districts did.
And that was a question of choice, just like other towns, do. They make their decisions based on the community need. And our community felt very strongly, and that was the message we got from our community engagement meetings, was take care of our kids and their social, emotional, and mental health as a result of the pandemic. And that was the message that we heard. And that's why we went in that direction. And
We had also
Tom
heard
Tom
the
and his
teachers
team.
that
Right,
things were deteriorating.
right,
Right.
and that's,
We needed to,
yeah, that was the data that Tom and his team got that drove us in that direction. You know?
But life doesn't always give you nice choices.
well, and not every position that was ESSER
Mhm.
funded, you'll see in the budget.
Mhm.
So 5
Right.
behavior interventionists, there's several things that aren't
Right,
gonna show up.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's more that can be done, but again, I was asked, and I always feel obligated to sort of present it as like what we really want. You know, this is what we really want, what we really need tonight. What can we afford? And what choices, you know, do we have to make, or the board have to direct me to make to get it where you want it to be? There's still a lot of variables in the air, but you know, basically that's what we do every year at this time. We refine that position. We know that, what was it, 12% is too high.
Yes,
We're not gonna ask the voters for 12%.
absolutely not. Either that, or we're asking a bulletproof vest for me. But I mean, because that, and this is the real difference between the town and the school budgets. Yours is much more tied into, if spending goes up X, that's what the tax rate's gonna go up. Not making excuses, but there's been years where our budget went up, but the tax rate went down because of all these other factors that the state comes up with calculations. And eventually it goes the other way. It just, and we've been prepared for that. And we might not get to a number we like, but we have, it may get to a number we have to swallow.
I assure you, none of us feel wealthier, but the fact that there's a demand for housing has put up housing prices. So on paper, we all have more valuable properties, and therefore the state's going, you can afford to give some more.
The way all that works is proven by the 2 previous years. I mean, we did not come in with the tax rate last year of 1.3, I don't believe, or the year before at 3.5. Negative 3.5. So. A lot of variables in school funding.
We're used to really bad news at this point.
Yeah.
So that's why we're not panicking. We're looking like, okay, that's sort of why it always works out. It looks horrible.
I was gonna say, at least we're concealing our panic.
It is. It certainly is concerning. We don't want to fluff that off 12.11, but it's definitely gonna move.
And certainly, I mean, I know. I'm sure the board will talk about the audit, but there may be some funds available from fund balance to buy down the tax rate.
you know, and we've done that in the past. When it, you know, was prudent and. So. As we look at the final numbers, you know. They're gonna be different. They will be different. And, you know, hopefully, the one that scares me the most is right now is the CLA, you know, because the other ones we know are normal correctional issues. You know, because, you know, we've done this enough where we've seen that first draft of the student numbers, for example, come together, and I can remember Jacob's dad, when he was doing that job, go like, you know, I mean, we had to peel him off the ceiling, you know. I mean, it was that weird, you know, those first batch of numbers. And then, you know, we could kind of reach him out and say, Scott, you know, it's changing. And then he finally give us, looks like they finally got it together, you know, and give us this draft, and we go, that's a little more manageable, this discussion now. So it's part of that educational process, you know, and funding.
Yeah, but with 3 years worth of inflated sales data. I'm putting money on 78.
Well, that's why I'm nervous
Yeah.
with you.
These numbers on the website.
What's that?
These numbers on the website.
Yes, yes,
In the school board agenda.
yeah.
Much to our chagrin.
But it's all there.
Yeah.
School board 12/14/2022 meeting. Find it all.
All in all, presently at this moment, it's a $3.4 million increase in general fund. Sure, we'll get into more of that as we come to executive session. Since the salary increases for all three contracts that are currently being negotiated.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, Jake.
No, I can't thank you, Jacob. But I know you work hard, so and it's not your fault.
And we're not placing blame.
I am.
Yeah, usually it's you giving the guy the big tax bill, right? So it's
Still be me. All right.
Okay, so we're gonna do policies right next.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had two different policies in front of you. The first of which is the transgender and other gender diverse student policy. We took the feedback that Ren Parker gave us, and thanks to her help and feedback, we tightened up the definition section, corrected what turned out to be a problem with the original draft language where two different definitions had gotten their definition switched. Once we looked at it and said what happened there, we tightened up the student record section. We particularly with regards to how people's names are used and changing names to reflect what the student wishes to have used. That has been tightened down, so there's less chance to willfully misinterpret how it's supposed to be done. And we tightened up additionally the use of gender segregated facilities. A language which basically says that in accordance with state law, the locker room or restroom that you're going to use is the one based on the student's gender identity. So that's basically it. It was basically tightened up and cleaned up.
And this will be the last time I ask this question, I promise. Under the policy scope, personally, I still don't like the term all schools. I think it should be all personnel. Number two,
Okay.
it says all schools in the Hartford School District must comply with this policy. I've been saying I would like that to read all personnel. Because, I mean, it also would apply to somebody in maintenance, it would apply to somebody. But, and this is my last time, if we decide to go with this, I'll vote for it.
So I think, you know, to get at your point is finding the right word that covers all. The whole community, the whole Hartford community.
That's even better.
You know, because, you know, I think that's the issue,
Right.
you know, or at least that's what I'm sensing, Russ.
It is.
And it's the word, you know, like coming up with a word that says, you know, this is our house, this is how we roll, this is the way it is, you know.
You could say all individuals in the Hartford School District.
Well, sometimes the policies are for the students.
Yeah.
I understand that, but we still would expect the maintenance.
Yeah.
People,
Well, the
yes.
maintenance and
Yeah,
I understand your trying to think of a quick and efficient resolution of this right now.
What about not saying schools, but just applies to the Hartford School District? And it's.
In its entirety,
Yeah.
something.
I could live with that.
Yeah, me too, I like that better.
All elements?
Yeah,
Be fine.
Something.
Again, that makes it clear it's
Okay.
everything.
Okay, then change it to elements. Then.
Yep.
Yes,
Uh,
needed a magic.
all elements of the Hartford School
District must comply. And that's sort of nice because you could have argued under the right way of looking at the world sideways through a mirror backwards, that all schools meant that the superintendent's office was exempt or something.
That-
So,
Exactly.
Right,
so
exactly.
I'm fine with that.
That's what we're trying to get.
Yep.
Cool.
So,
Thank you, Rose.
thank you for your feedback. And I look forward to that going into effect ASAP.
Yes.
And I would like to thank Ren for her contributions and
Yes,
feedback.
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Hard worker.
she did a,
Yes.
we're pretty fortunate to have. her.
Also Wendy Keller for
Yeah,
helping draft the first version,
yes.
the speech pathologist in the district. Who really helped a lot.
Yes, it was what we started with, so we had, it's always easier to edit somebody else's work than to start and do it afresh yourself. And we were given a great starting block to mold the final thing out of. The second policy was the first reading of a policy, non-discriminatory mascots in school branding. This is sort of, as you might guess, the result of some controversy in other districts about which mascots they used and so forth, and the brouhaha about that, which meant that the state of Vermont said enough's enough, you're gonna do it our way. And based on that, the Vermont School Boards Association came up with draft language to put in place what the state is mandating that we do. We took that language and tweaked it very slightly, basically just tightening up in my mind. And what you have is about 97% exactly what we were provided by the School Boards Association in response to the state mandates that we do this. And we, of course, look forward to any feedback and so forth. And I think it's pretty straightforward. Basically, we're gonna keep in mind what we're doing in the way of branding. Fortunately, it's terribly hard to offend the people with the idea that we're calling ourselves hurricanes. Because there's not a whole lot of.
You don't say things like that because.
But yeah,
Okay, not to be a stick in the mud.
Yes.
But under number 2, I'll make the same argument. Because what if like a fundraiser or something like that comes through with an objectionable branding item?
I'm fine again replacing with elements.
Okay, then that's all. Yep,
Yeah.
and we could put this in parentheses, the Rutland
Yeah,
policy.
the language came, yes, we could. This scope language came specifically straight from, but anyway.
But the way they waffle back and forth with the, being from that area.
Oh, that's right.
But yeah, other than that, I think this is great, so.
Right, so,
You need a motion on the first one and then motion, well.
So why don't we entertain a motion for the acceptance of the final reading of the gender-based policy.
as amended.
As amended, I'll make a motion that we accept the gender-based policy as amended.
Second,
And we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you very, very much.
And a motion for, with congratulations and thank yous to
Yes.
all of the folks who participated in that first one. Because we had a lot of support in the district from students and, faculty, so.
And administration.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the policy on non-discriminatory.
No, actually, this is
No,
the
first
first
reading.
reading.
First reading, excuse me. I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of the policy on non-discriminatory mascots as amended.
Second,
So we have a motion and a second to accept the first reading of the mascot policy as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
And again, thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
So let's see. Town meeting schedule?
We got a
Monitoring
motion.
report, EL10, and then.
coming schedule.
EL10 is
EL10 to be first.
Yeah,
it used to be first, but the race and equity
Yeah.
policy was up for tonight, and that was a big one, so I took the liberty of pulling it out of the consent agenda. If the board doesn't like that, I guess you could put it back in the consent agenda, but seemed
No.
important enough that you wanted to go through
well,
where we're at.
that's why we decided to put it there anyways. But timing wise, Julie's got,
Oh, it's okay. I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate it though.
The plan changed.
okay. So how are they doing? Just out of curiosity.
Last,
Hypothetically.
Not, we're actually listening, but hypothetically.
text me the score.
Yeah,
Sounds like,
what that ding was.
sounds like they're down 1-0, but they're playing the D1 state champion right now. So I think that's pretty good.
So, but we have to kind of check on the kids.
We do have to check in with kids, and Hartford girls just ice hockey in an away game tonight, and they just won 5-2.
Oh,
So
nice.
let's keep that energy going.
Yes, because they're in the same place. So
Right,
I think they're
okay.
both up. Yeah, Essex. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, good
You
for
know,
them.
the big dog.
yes.
Yeah.
One of the big dogs, I'm saying, the big dog is CBU.
Yeah.
Oh.
Really. Anyways, back to our work.
Gonna take a break for our happy.
I was just saying that was
Yeah,
a
really.
$10.
Yeah, that was good. We needed that energy boost, So that brings us to our monitoring report on EL10 race and equity. So Tom, you want to lead in?
Yeah, we adopted that new race and equity governance policy 2 years ago. So we've had one monitoring report last year, and this year we wanted to just update you on where we're at and how we're doing with that work. So Roy is going to take it away.
So when we think of where we're at with our work in equity, you think about the anti-racism policy and the procedure and the strategic plan from working with Mary Gannon. And working from the strategic plan has been where Maggie has driven the majority of the work since coming on in the district. I would say before Maggie got there, we had an equity committee that was starting that work, but it really getting Maggie here is what gave it the accelerant that we needed to start moving the work forward. The strategic goal kind of breaks things down into like 3 categories for what we're trying to do. We're trying to institutionalize inclusive and equitable practices. We're trying to promote strategies to eliminate race-based disparities. And we're promoting inclusion and engagement of all, particularly marginalized community members. In here, if you folks wanted to go back to previous iterations of this slideshow that shows what we've been working on. I put it at the top. But what I tried to do is put in what we're still continuing to do and trying to grow. What I would want to stress as you look at any of these topics and when we talk about it, we're trying to provide opportunities and on-ramps for every staff member in the district. And anytime, if we say we have a equity group or we have an affinity group, at no point have we accomplished the task of all members being involved in all activities. So I want to be completely upfront that in some cases they're small groups starting the work, but small groups starting the work is how we're going to get this district where we need to be. But I just want to make sure that we don't become overly enthusiastic thinking that we have accomplished more than we have. So I just, in working with Maggie, it's a delicate balance of celebrating what we do and not shortchanging how far we have to go. So just keeping that in mind when we talk about this stuff. So with the community, it is continuing to do the items that we have been working on. I think that the board wants to continue working with Mary Gannon and continuing to grow the learning as this community. But the highlight with the H Corey in this column is what I want to celebrate is the student liaison. And Molly had a chance to come speak with us earlier in the year, and she really is a great representative of what a student member on a committee can be. So I just a quick second to shout out what she's able to accomplish for us. The work for the staff and the students. The anti-racism inquiry group is the perfect example of what I'm talking about. It's independent learning by a group of staff members. It's not all staff members doing this, but each person's impacting that learning group where they're at, and they're getting to learn from each other. So those are the types of opportunities that we really want to celebrate and grow for others. Equity teams and libraries, I apologize. Touch things. Are continuing to grow at each building. And I think where Maggie has put a real to celebrate where a lot of her effort is growing the student equity groups and affinity spaces in buildings. So as we look at how to assist Maggie in the work, I think that that's one of the ones that we want to get as much feedback from her as possible in terms of what supports those groups need. I think that resources is do we carve out the time for these folks and do we somehow support them monetarily in whatever ways they need. On the administrative side, we have a district equity committee. We meet and we are still working on how to drive the work, but we're really trying to be concerted in terms of where the strategic plan sits now and where we evolved as a district and need to modify the strategic plan so that we're maybe not doing exactly what it says in the plan, but doing the spirit of the plan and how to move us forward. As always, Mary Gannon's always going to be in with our PD. She is a great resource for both Maggie and for anybody else in the district who just needs support. And then Katie Novak is relatively new in the last 2 years for you folks to hear about. The district has put together a small group of administrators right now to review how are we creating a MTSS, and that's our multi-tiered systems of support, and ensuring that all students have an equitable access to an education. So just know that that's driving the work of this small subset. And at this time, Tom actually mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting, that we started to interview teachers about how meetings are used. Because if we're going to impact student learning, it comes from the teachers. And we're trying to figure out what are the best ways to support the time that they do have to meet and discuss curriculum instruction assessment. In terms of recruiting, employing and retaining, one of the spots that we're trying to do to diversify our applicant pool is to utilize job postings with the HBCUs, which is your historically Black colleges and universities. Maggie reviews job postings to ensure that the language we use shows that it is a equitable and inclusive district that you want to come work with and work for. And Julie is actually spending a tremendous amount of time around licensing, because if we're going to grow the workforce, the need for provisional licensing is going to grow. And I would say becoming proficient in developing still, we're finding new ways to come up with provisional licenses.
Yeah, every day.
Every day we get more to it, but it's creative in a good way and for a good reason. And so what I do want to start to do is to help you folks start to visualize when we talk about what we're doing, is to start to put them into categories of how we're going to impact the student voice, the curriculum instruction assessment, and the professional development opportunities as they relate to the strategic plan. Strategic plan says that all of our work is going to fall into three main categories: community engagement, our leadership capacity, and policies and practice. So what I'm going to try to do when Julie and I are creating these presentations for you, Tom, is that we're going to try and identify which of those three categories the work we're doing at this time falls, so that hopefully that the plan aligns with what we're trying to do. I think most of these are pretty self-explanatory. A couple that I would like to highlight for you is when we talk about leadership capacity, both on the staff and the administrative side, we've worked on how we provide a culturally responsive education for students. Two ways that we're really trying to focus on that is we're reading Alex Vanette's book, which we shared over the summer retreat with you folks. Buildings are doing it in different ways, but I would say most buildings are utilizing it as a resource. And whether it be small book groups, the high school is using it as the leadership team attends Alex's monthly work where she breaks down a section of the book. And okay, you've read this, you have questions now, let me help you impact your building with those thoughts. And she helps them process the book. And the other one is, and I really want to put a plug in for Julie on this, because she's really taken the lead with the coaches and utilizing coaching for equity by Aguilar. And I think that fostering some pretty solid conversations.
Really, yeah, really amazing conversations about how the coaching work supports equity and how it increases access for all students. And so we've been having some really amazing discussion around that in their practice.
On the policy and practice side, from Vanette again, I think the concept of highlighting the policies and procedures we have in place systemically can be part of the problem in terms of what's limiting children's access. And so for us to start reviewing our policies, I think I just use that chapter as something that we've shared as a group here, and that's going to push us to start to review. But even before that, the policies we're writing now, bringing folks in and looking at the transgender policy and making sure that who's writing it, who has say in what it represents. I think it's just being far more purposeful. And then celebration, the school board received the equity grant. We just received that in the mail the other day. And I put it over in policies and practice only because it's coming from you folks, how you utilize the money in that area. So just as a small celebration there as well. So that's where we're at this moment. Folks have any questions?
So we are making progress. We're doing real work, but we need to do better. And accordingly, I would like to propose that we establish a subcommittee or a committee of this board. I guess a committee is the right word. Committee of this board to work with the administration of the district and to look at ways in which we can further improve our commitment and work in this area. And therefore, I'd like to move that we ask Coach to take on that work.
Is that a motion?
That was a motion.
Second.
Well, I was waiting for further discussion.
I think I'm all in favor of that, and I think one thing as part of that work is we should look at EL 10 as it applies to enforcement. Because that would be the logical, under our form of governance, potentially logical place if we're going to enhance the policy.
That would make sense. So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you very much. This, in all of the work on our table right now, this is probably the most difficult of our work. You know, we know how to attack the other issues. You know, we have specialists, you know, like in those areas. You know, we do training, we develop. But this affects the hearts and minds of all of us, not just our kids, but all of us. And when you're engaged in that type of work, it can and does become visceral. So it's a whole nother level, you know, of activity. And, you know, our district, you know, has committed itself to that work. And I think that, you know, this is our next step, just like we have in other parts of our work, said, this is our next step. So this is our next step in this work. And we're going to push it to another level, you know, because we have to. You know, we don't have a choice in it. So thanks for what we're doing, and just be doing a little more. Okay. So that committee reports. So let's Russ.
Little me, okay.
Finance.
Finance committee. Finance committee met yesterday to review the audit. We have an unqualified opinion again this year. We're going to end the year with a surplus. So generally the auditors were very impressed. There was one management comment regarding the student activity funds, which was discussed, where Jacob and Tom are going to come up with a proposal to address the concern. There was no irregularities or major deficiencies found. This is an area that they suggested we enhance our controls over. And I think that's been a consensus of everybody, but this is sort of the impetus for us to take action in coordination with the new accounting system and realizing we need to consider the additional burden added to the business office personnel in the transition, that type of thing. That was pretty much the gist of the finance committee meeting. Should I go into support staff negotiation committee, or?
Actually, the that general statement would suffice because we'll do the discussion in executive session.
Okay, basically, the general statement was issued, and I can't remember word for word, but basically, significant agreements have been accomplished. And productive discussions are going on regarding some compensation matters. And we will be meeting again the 19th?
Next Monday.
Okay, next Monday.
Cool. This, Nick?
I really don't have too much report. I sent stuff out to you guys earlier, copy of the new draft and also, you know, in case you don't have anything else to read. Hartford Community Coalition, we'll be meeting again, and then we won't meet again until January, the middle of January.
Yeah, because we
Yeah.
got a finance committee
Yeah, we
meeting
got-
before that.
So we're looking for new board members. If anyone's interested, give us a holler. Still doing lots of work, continuing to do the work we've already done and thinking about some more serious work to do. What we want to get done. I haven't done too much with the court, you.
Neither have I, because the
I'm
meeting
sorry.
dates have corresponded with
exactly.
negotiations.
I,
And there was a question about who was going to take Hava's spot on the committee, and I responded that right now we're in the middle of budget and negotiations and replacing a board member. And once those hurdles are passed, then we'll address the appointment of another member.
Thanks. Peter.
With respect to the policy committee, you just basically already got that report. With respect to the teachers' negotiations, the summary that was just provided by Russ basically could be dittoed and would apply equally to the teachers' administration. The things are so far going very amicably and going well.
And then the APs manifests, the payrolls have been moving, very smoothly. I'd like to commend Jacob for his leadership, in that area in helping our district transition to new personnel in those areas. I know that the public might not be aware, but we had members in Tom's office that transitioned into retirement with anywhere from 24, 30, and 56 years of service to this district. So when you have that much institutional knowledge moving away, it's kind of scary. But Tom and Jacob have really done a great job with that team, and they're growing into it. Because we see it every week. So that's the update from those groups. So I guess that does our reports for the, and we can at this point move to the public comments. So if there anyone would like to share a public comment, they may.
Anybody in the public, Roy?
We have two. No hands raised though.
Oh, no hands raised. Okay, may I, Coach, share a public comment? I would just like, in the interest of transparency, inform everybody that I have recently listed my house for sale and will be moving out of town at some point. It's still very early in the process, very few showings. So I will be here for a bit, and I am committed to help Hartford come to a resolution, satisfactory resolution of its budget issues, because essentially it is in my best interest. Because two of the things people wonder about in buying a house is the quality of the school system and the level of property taxes. And having a number of friends who work in the district or clients, I still have a very vested interest, and I have shared with my fellow board members, if they ever feel that I get to a point where I'm retired in place, they should let me know, and either I'll fix it or I'll resign type thing. But I am fully committed to providing public service, and with some false modesty, believe in the budgeting process, I can be useful.
And he is, may I?
Yes, sir.
Tuesday at the Tech Center. Our Rotary Club meets there once a month. And that wonderful crew in there is cooking this delicious, beautiful food and feeding us. And again, we just had this wonderful meal. And then, thank goodness, and then we went into lockdown. I knew what was going on. Two of the other staff members there knew. Obviously, the kids all knew exactly what to do. I mean, the back shades are coming down, the doors are being locked, the kids are taken off into the kitchen for wherever they go back in that direction. Most of the Rotarians didn't have a clue what was going on. So they're looking all around, the lights are off and everything got real quiet, and the three of us that knew that we're still sitting at the table knew what was going on. And so we've got people that were talking and claiming, and so we had to explain to them what lockdown was. And this is what you had to do. Well, lockdown went for 20 minutes. Let me tell you, some of these people haven't sat still in 20 minutes, especially with food in them or with their mouths closed. My point is that and we've already talked about it at the Rotary Club, if we're going to be having outside people come in to use any part of our facility, I think they need to be told, given a slip of paper, something that tells them this is what happens. No, you cannot get up and walk around. No, you cannot be talking. The things and why our kids are having to go through this as often as they do. And I just think it's something we need to be thinking about, because thank goodness this was a drill. But if it had not been a drill, there's some elderly people that were, me too, were in that that, a couple of them have to walk with canes and this kind of stuff. And truly, I think that if we're going to be bringing people in that don't know what a lockdown is and how we need to handle it, we need to have some kind of information or a policy or something. I'm not sure if a policy is needed, but something needs to be done so that they understand what's going on. And God forbid if it had been a real event that prevented one of them from getting injured or hurt.
Well, I think that because we already have an existing, committee that Tom has brought together, and it's kind of ironic that today is the anniversary of the Connecticut. And it's another one of those stories that just raises your ire. And I remember that night, Tom and I standing at the end of the ramp in his office, just like in shock, trying to determine what we were going to do as a district. And Tom brought us through that very well, and we're still sharing the work that was done by that committee. So to make a long story short, I think my comment would be is if we bring that to the committee for how we would bring that out, as far as adding maybe a sheet to the application form. So like if I'm a community member and I'm applying for the space, because you have to fill out the form, then with your form, either electronically or otherwise, you'd get, and this is our safety procedure for lockdown.
And I just had one further before you.
It's-
I'm guessing the committee's already considered this, but you could even apply that to when there's an election going on in the
Yes.
building. Have we thought about the lockdown drill during an election process
Yeah.
and notifying the officials at the ballot boxes what they're,
Yeah, what they need.
yeah.
Exactly.
Good point, you know, especially since we're next door to the lady who was in charge of them.
Can you do a lockdown without including the gymnasium?
I'm sorry?
Can you do a lockdown without including the gymnasium? For voting?
You know,
We might do a drill, but a real lockdown.
no, everything
Whatever.
would shut, everything would have to shut down for safety, because, you know, God forbid, you know, some bozo that is, you know,
Mm.
gets access to that area, that's a lot of folks.
Yeah.
So it's a
I will bring
procedural,
it up.
it's a procedural thing, how it's handled.
From the gymnasium, can you lock down the rest of the building now or not? The high school.
Well, it can't, everything can be locked down, okay? The question becomes the process and procedure, and that's what this committee, you know, our safety committee deals with all the time. Because we have the police department, the fire department as part of that committee, as well as all of the, you know, there's administrative components. Tom, you can share, you know, like the makeup of the committee, but it's the key essential folks that know our facilities and have responsibilities for integrating safety within it.
I might suggest getting the school and town and school district meeting committee up to speed on that, because there is a town and school district meeting committee that's in charge of meetings that have to take place on the town side and the school side. They would be the ones to approach, I would say, to bring them up to speed.
Well, and the select board, because there are times, you know, that the select board has requested the use of the space.
But that's
You know.
part of the school.
No,
Town
no,
school
no,
committee, I think
no,
it's-
no. When you guys have requested use of the auditorium, for example, okay, you know, there's times when, you know, let's say if you decided you needed training and you needed a training space bigger than what's available here. And you know, I think it's appropriate for us all to be engaged in that thought, because
It's gonna be wise to set up a dialogue between them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. I would like to see better communication between the town and school.
so.
Thank you.
You had something else?
I don't think so. Did I have something else?
I thought you said two things. Don't mean.
No, I just, the one
Okay.
thing that I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget that part.
Okay.
I might have forgotten something else, but.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
so that brings us to public comment, and at this point, we would do the consent agenda.
Are there any appointments or resignations?
Yes, there are. We have appointments, Stephanie Cross, out of Queechee School to the preschool intervention, Laura Brooks at the Ottaquechee School first grade, Julia Waswo filling the vacancy in music at the Ottaquechee School, and Jacqueline Pageu, I think that's how you say it, at the White River School filling the music vacancy. And then we have two resignations. I think people know that Maggie is resigning at the end of her maternity leave, Maggie Ibrahim. So we've already started working on a replacement plan with her. And David Ballou, a middle school ELA teacher, is resigning.
It'd be hard to find a replacement for me.
And then you also have three monitoring reports, EL4, which is one that I did, financial conditions and activities. And again, Peter was gracious and did two that Havel would have had. BSR, 3, accountability of the superintendent, and BP7, board committee principal. So those are all in the package. Nice to keep that going.
I'd like to move that we accept the consent agenda. We extend our warm welcome to those who are joining district and extend our best wishes to those who are departing.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda with considerations. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Next meeting agendas, as we know, our primary focus will be, trying to get our budget nailed down.
Yeah, you also have and it was in your packet tonight, but one person submitted their application for the vacancy for the rest of the term. Take that out.
So next meeting's agenda will put on consideration of applications for a replacement.
Yeah.
Okay. I just more saying that for the public in case somebody else is interested.
Right. Because it's open until until we fill it.
And it's a lot of fun, so please apply.
So the problem is, of course, that you tend to check in and don't check out. Happened to me. The rest is escaping.
I would rather drastically by selling my house.
So those are the key ones, and then we'll develop the rest of it from there. So that brings us to the meeting evaluation.
Oh, I didn't print that out.
Back of the packet.
Oh, back of the packet, okay.
Yep.
I'm going to bid lady.
Hey,
Thanks, Lanny.
Thank you,
thank you
Lanny.
very much.
All right,
Without the.
and here's something else you guys are gonna have to replace.
Yeah.
All right. At the end of each board meeting, a board member or the superintendent or appointed evaluator for the meeting completes this monitoring form. The responses are shared and a discussion is held on areas that need improvement. The chair collects the completed forms to use in the board's monitoring reports. Board was prepared for the meeting. We were definitely satisfactory. Board's time was spent on ends, not means. I think absolutely. Each board member was given an opportunity to participate. Yes. Board treated all persons with courtesy and fairness, except for Jacob. Board adhered to Robert's Rules of Order as appropriate. Satisfactory. Board adhered to its adopted governance style. It emphasized outward vision. It encouraged diversity in viewpoints. It exercised strategic leadership, not administrative detail. It maintained distinction between board and staff roles. It used collective decision-making. It looked to the future. The big S, satisfactory for all those.
I bet he recites those in his sleep.
I'm practicing to be an auctioneer. What can I say?
There you go.
All right, and that will cover it.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is need for yet another executive session. Therefore, pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1B, I move that we find that there is need for an executive session to discuss labor relations with employees, and that we enter into said executive session.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to go into executive session to discuss labor issues. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you.